I've been looking at the chat and there've been some really excellent comments, lots of references from Sabine. There were some comments from Bernadette looking at what we need to do to move forward, holding both of the parties accountable at the next election. There's recognition of everything that happened in the context of the killing of Kumanjai Walker and all the racist processes in the court that followed. I think that continues to emerge since the trial, and having seen the overt racism of the perpetrator, Zach Rolfe, and his attitudes towards community. But it's not just individuals. I think we have to remember it's a whole police culture in the Northern Territory that is inherently racist, and I think we have to support the calls of Warlpiri people at Yuendumu to have no guns in community, because police cannot be trusted to serve. The role of police historically, and we can see that with the massacres, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but the use of force has loomed large in the policing of Aboriginal communities. Bernadette also speaks to the fact that there continues to be assimilation, and there needs to be more truth-telling, and that tribal council and cultural authority must be respected, along with bilingual learning and education, respect for elders and emerging First Nations people and their wisdom, and that housing on country is paramount, and imperative, I should say. But just to add to that, and we saw in the Santa Teresa case that it's about housing, but it's humane housing. Japarula spoke about the fact that there are third world conditions, and when the people of Santa Teresa went to fight for their right to humane housing, the Northern Territory government explicitly fought back and sought to deny that right to humane housing. So these are really compelling questions, and I'd like to open it up to everyone, either to put a question on the chat, or if you want to just put your hand up, we can do it the old-fashioned way as well. Kathy, I'm just going to hand it over to you for a minute to take over, because I just need to respond to one of my children for a sec.
Okay. So now I think if there's a question, could you possibly put it in the chat right now? Because I'm navigating my screen and seem to have lost full view. I'm working on it. Okay. So now I think I can see everyone. If somebody's waving, or is that, all right. If anybody's waving to ask a question. Otherwise, from class to everyone, that was the question. If anyone can answer this, it says, I believe the provider of the basic card administration receives approximately 9,000 per person who's provided, and that person is linked to the National Party. I do believe it's someone in the Anderson family, if I'm not spreading evil rumours that aren't true. But I had heard that figure, but possibly Thalia might have been able, or maybe Greg Marks. Are you aware? We are aware that the owner of the Indue card, now a corporation, I would say, does get very well rewarded for that card and does, if I'm not going to be sued for libel, definitely has the links to the National Party. It's in the family name of the Andersons. And one of the Andersons, Doug Anderson, that's right, was deputy or head of the Nationals at some time in government. So, yeah, it's a disgrace that money can be handed out to corporations on that card. And maybe Frank could clarify for us. I think, Frank, you told me that I'm not 100% sure if they were able to enforce compulsory Inju cards on the territory. What I remember so far is, Thalia, you're back with us. The kids are settled, the kids in bed. But I remember Jackie Lambie going to the territory to talk to people living under the basics card, and I thought that they couldn't enforce it in the territory. But Frank told me that there's letters, the sneaky way that they're trying to get people to be on that card is they're now saying they can buy tobacco. So maybe, Hans, if you could unmute Frank and Thalia, there might be some clarification to that question. Or
yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think I read that people could now, with a cashless card, buy tobacco. I may be wrong about that. Doesn't matter. The one of those things that was in the post office, you know, addressed to the householder or whatever. Also, the people that didn't have a house, but doesn't matter. The thing is that it was pretty obvious that they did not make it very clear what was involved in this new thing. It was couched in language that would make people think, oh, yeah, that's all right, I'll switch over to the cashless card. It says that it was going to be 50%, but in the fine print or in some of the things, it said that this may be reviewed in future. Well, when they first talked about the cashless card, it was going to be 80%. But then I guess they figured it was just too hard to sell it. And they put 50-50, but a little rider saying that this may not be forever. And yeah, the whole language was just aimed, but it reminds me of the time when they took the compulsion off the basic card. They made it very hard to get off the bloody thing. There was all these hurdles, all these things that you had to put forward. So most people didn't bother. They just kept the basic card.
very insidious.
Oh yeah. Well, everything the intervention did was insidious.
Insidious. And Ricky, I was really touched the way that you described it as a dark cloud. You know, it's a dark cloud is our whole history, but yeah, hanging over.
Well, it's actually a white
I see,
it's a white
Hans, that Bernadette McPhee has her hand up as well to ask a question.
Go ahead, Bernadette. I just need to ask you to unmute.
I've done it. Hi, everybody. I've listened in tonight, both Bernadette and myself, Georgina Gartland. Really
Bernadette, we're just losing you. Maybe turn off your camera and see if that helps.
mob and elders and emerging young people who have spoken tonight. Just in relation to the cashless debit card, now that was outright rejected and the basics. Okay, is that better? Hello, is that better?
Yeah.
I can hear.
Georgina, we can't hear you again.
Georgina did, Bernadette asked a couple of questions. She asked, firstly, if there's any way in which people could contribute support to grandmothers against removal. She especially referred to calls for raising the age of criminal responsibility and to close Dondale. Annie-Elaine, did you want to unmute and say anything?
They did talk about raising the age to 14. Yeah, but I don't know if it's in the happening at the moment. That's even with what's his name from Tasmania? Rodney Dillon. Rodney Dillon was the one that really put that forward about raising the age to 14. And then, yeah. So I don't know if it's happened yet or not. I don't know. And there's also the issue of spithoods. Oh yeah, get rid of the spithoods. That's another very strong complaint. Yeah.
The petition for the spithoods was on tonight's invitation reminder for everyone. If I can jump in, I had a question to Kumanjai when you spoke about, I haven't read your Indigenous X article, so I'll get onto it, but you said how strong it was to have the First Nations Senate members of Parliament. Do you think, you know, they're going to have any voice within their parties? I think Lydia Thorpe being Greens.
And during the year.
What do you think? What was your feeling from the meeting? Do you think they took on board and what people were saying?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the first time. I think Larissa Baldwin from Get Up had said that's the first time they've had a inquiry into fracking, and then you've got the first time having not just 3 First Nations senators, but 3 female First Nations women, strong women, yeah. First Nations women, you know, sitting in, and you've got Malandiri, who's direct family for the people, community members and campaigners speaking up. So yeah, of course, that, you know, being witness to that and seeing them affording that time, or the community members and campaigners actually having the time to cover a lot of the issues, not directly related to fracking, but involving pretty much everything we're talking about that's impacted from the intervention. So yeah, it does give good hope, and you know, it seems like they've got a little bit of a team going now, so it's almost like they can start really pushing harder from the inside out, so to speak.
Ricky, what about your perspective on the political will? Are you, like, what was the response to your Senate submission? Are you feeling like the talks you're having at a higher level are, you know, resonating, your concerns are resonating with those politicians, or are you feeling like there's a lot of lip service?
I think, you know, with Senator Thorpe and Senator Cox, you know, even during that last Senate inquiry, where Senator McMahon came after me again and said that I wasn't a traditional owner, and said that in front of my grandmother, who was sitting there and present during that inquiry, you know, Lydia Thorpe came out to bat for me, Senator Thorpe, sorry. So I absolutely have a whole lot of faith in particularly those 2 women, because I've had the opportunity to sit down and speak with them, not just once, but on a few occasions. So in terms with the Greens Party, and you know, hearing what they have to say about climate change and about, you know, the racist politics in Australia, they, particularly the Green part, the party themselves, they've been saying a lot of the good things, the right things. So that gives me hope, and I'd love to see and love to be able to see them, in action. Whether or not they'll be, have a lot more political sway, when it comes to, because I suspect that Labor will be voted in, and I'm hoping that the Greens and Independents will have a lot of the power when it comes to, voting on issues. So that's where my hope lies. It's with that, in that situation. I've really lost all hope, and for Labor, for me, they're as bad as the Liberals. They just wear racism a bit better than what the Liberals do. The Liberals, that they're out to get you. The Labor, they're the quiet, we'll pretend to like you type, which is the type that you've got to be a lot, really careful around, because you don't know if they like you or not, whereas the Liberals, they don't like you. So I think that's how I feel about the whole political climate at the moment, and I'm watching very carefully, because with the fracking, we know that Labor are for fracking. They didn't vote against stopping that money going in, the 21 million to, I think it was directly to Empire. So we know that Labor in the Northern Territory, their pre-election promise was that they weren't going to allow fracking in the Northern Territory. That was one of their promises that they made to us. That's why they got in, I believe. And then they've done a complete 180 and they just opened up the territory for fracking. So I've lost all hope and respect for Labor as a political party, and in the Northern Territory as well. And I know that would put Senator Malarndirri McCarthy in a really difficult position, because, she has her family there in Burralool, and I believe that she's fighting tooth and nail for everything she could possibly get for her family, but at the same time, she has to toe the party line. So I'd imagine she'd be in a really difficult position. But yeah, that's my my thoughts on the political climate at the moment.
Thanks so much, Ricky. I'm just really glad that you're up there having those discussions and that you've got your finger on the pulse. And I think Bernadette mentioned or had a question about independence, but I hope one day, there are people in this room who also run for government, because I feel that at both the federal and territory level, it's just this revolving door of Labor and Liberal, and they speak from, or they sing from, the same song sheet, and there need to be different voices like yours, Ricky, or Kumanjaya, Auntie Elaine's, or Japarula's, who provide something that gives us some hope in humanity and the future of our country, and of this country, of your country. We're coming close to an end. There's a few more questions in the chat. One of them is, what can listeners to these powerful speakers do? What action can we take in relation to the election? Should we run campaigns or lobby politicians, focus on specific campaigns like fracking or ending the intervention? And then another one from Anna, who lives on Arundaland. She's involved in the Intervention Rollback Action Group, and she asks, is there energy for a national day of action to oppose the continuation to the intervention? That sounds like an excellent idea, and should absolutely be led by people in the Northern Territory and supported by us from elsewhere. I'm not sure if we should just go around and answer those questions collectively about what action can be taken. Should there be things like national days or lobbying, and what should the focus be? So who would like to start in just a few closing remarks? Greg, do you want to go first? If you could just unmute Greg, that will help us.
Look, I'm just saying, my approach has just been to bang on doors and hope one of them opens. But it's very difficult. And I think the other point too is that it's not just politicians, it's senior bureaucrats. A lot of this stuff was designed at a very high level in the bureaucracy. But there's an interplay between right-wing commentators at the time, government, but also senior bureaucrats. You know, I've sat across the table from them. And I talk about their attitudes. I know because I've heard them say it. And some of them are very clever people, very arrogant people, and they're part of the problem as well. I don't know the current crop of bureaucrats, but I suspect that they also wield a lot of power in this situation. That's it.
And who would like to speak next? Kumanjaya, Auntie Elaine? Any final thoughts on what action needs to be taken or what we do in the lead up to the election?
I was just going to ask to clarify the G grandmothers, which is the Central Desert grandmothers, strong grandmothers. So yes, Central Desert strong mothers. G now is a group of ladies that came to the territory, and we supported each other in the struggle of what they were doing in New South Wales and how things that they were going through as well. So we came together and supported each other. Yeah.
And are you working together specifically on the removals, or is it much broader than that?
There was parts of it that we were working together on the removal of youths. Now, we don't hear as much now from the GMAs because we really tried to build up our grandmothers in Central Australia with no help of anyone, really. We just did all the volunteer work. And yeah, I brought that up last night at the forum, how we've been struggling, and yet that's what they talk about now is kids on the street and the damages that those youths are doing to the town in Barnwell. And I've said to them, why don't you just come together as a community? If you believe in this our town here, get together and come together as a community and stop. Then they started criticising the grandmothers group because everything went out of hand. And yeah, we're getting that now from the others that's out there that are doing that to us. But we have not replied to that. We just think, well, we know what we're doing. We're not going to apply to them. So why should we? And that's the best way to do it. Just let them just say that to you. And we know it's not true. Because if we start applying to their remarks, it'll only get worse. We just got to keep going ahead and doing what we're doing about the kids on the streets, and hope that things will change, and yeah, go from there. Then we just live in hope here at the moment for the youths on the streets, for them as well.
Yeah, I admire your strength in holding back and not speaking, the quiet strength. I equally feel frustrated that their system of police detention centres taking children has utterly failed, and yet they point the finger at you, the grandmothers trying to take care of the kids. I find that so insulting. They need to look at themselves in the mirror. But I also agree, it can be futile and a waste of energy to try and engage with people who, like Greg said, are arrogant and think they know best, and that's the core of the problem. You're much stronger than I am, aren't you?
I believe we all are here. It's just that, yeah, we all are really. Just hope that we can get a younger women coming up to walk beside us, because we aren't very well as we have been in the past, but we're still there here.
Thank you. Some final comments, maybe. We've yet to hear from Kumanjai, Frank, Ricky.
I'll probably add on a little bit to Arnie too. I mean, we see some of the antisocial behaviour. I guess that plays into the policies or how they want, how they want it all to play out. So they're pushing us from out bush, push them into town or end up in town, and then so it's part of what they've created, and then it actually plays into it further, because then they get to use that as ammunition as well. And they always do it around election time. CLP, Country Liberals, always big on tough on crime. Anti-Labour's, pushed that or flown that flag as well in the past. So yeah, I guess it's all that perpetual cycle. Same with the media, the way they react to issues about us, the Black Lives Matter, the deaths in custody, our reactions to deaths in custody. All of a sudden, the riots instead of people trying to stand up for themselves. So yeah, it all works the same way. And yeah, I guess what really does change, and so I guess we're not saying anything much that we haven't already said in the past 15 years, and more before that. It's all the same policies, just being recycled around again. And so yeah, maybe it's about I don't know how we try to make them accountable, except putting them on the spot and saying, what are you going to do about it, and how do we know it's not going to change as soon as you get in.
Totally calling it out, speaking up. Frank?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bruno had to go home and he said goodbye. Yeah, we have a big problem, and one of the big problems we have is that we're all scattered all over the countryside, all with various different problems, and they're applying divide and rule every which way, whether it's through the new amendments to the Land Right Act, which give more power to the land councils, which are basically a government white-fella organisation, in fact. And one of the biggest problems we have, that it's very difficult for people to get it through their head that, say, the Walbury culture, it's not inferior, it's just different, right? And so all the things like closing the gap and all these things that are pushed on these places all are based on the firm belief that English-speaking white society is superior. And it's very difficult for people to shed that, to sort of recognize that people have got the right to be different. And not only that, like the Walbri Nation, for instance, the Yunnamuu that I live on and love, which is very maligned in the press. There are people that are too frightened to come here because they believe that it's a dangerous place and all that sort of stuff, because that's the things that they're fed by, either politicians, bureaucrats, newspapers, and the public at large. And one thing that places like Yunnamuu don't need is pity or empathy. What they need is understanding and respect, and of course the whole setup, the way it is now, is very difficult to bring that in somehow. And I think that suggestion that Kathy made right at the beginning, where maybe we should push for the legal implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, if that somehow can be made into legislature, then some real change might flow from it. And that's enough.
Thank you. Dr. Sanja, did you have some final comments? Or Ricky, collectively?
No, you go first.
Thank you. You have little to add, except that if people want to help, I mean, having seen the fight directly for the last 15 years, I think there's so many battles to be fought. I mean, even ending the intervention, I mean, if one's bound by 1,000 shackles, removing one still leaves one bound. So rather than fighting all the individual fights, we just need to focus on empowerment. And so I think if everyone focused on treaties between the government and First Nations, returning power to the First Nations themselves, then all of these problems can be addressed through that process. So I think that's where the biggest bang for one's buck is, if that's the best I can say.
And I think I'd just like to I'd close with that. I'd just like to make the comment on how the Warlpiri people held themselves during all of that time with Kumanjayi, Walker, and all of the things that they've had to go on, and the pressures and the scrutiny that they were put through with the media, and how Central Desert people have conducted themselves, and they held themselves with honor and strength and dignity. And for me to see that, it was a beautiful thing, and they could have not represented, if you're going to represent Aboriginal people within Australia as a whole, I think they did an amazing job, and we are so proud of what they had done and how they held themselves with pride and dignity. But in regards with how to help, for us and myself, I want to take this to an international level, because I've had enough of how people are treating our grandmothers and our grandfathers, and it's about time that the government respect our elders and respect our land rights and our rights as human beings.
Yeah, I would love to see you, Ricky, as the national ambassador representing us all. I feel like the types of representations we see in international affairs are not in my name. So thank you so much to you all. I might hand it over to Kathy to just say some closing remarks, and just to reiterate that although I find these conversations heartbreaking, I think that this collective strength is what keeps all of us going, and we have to remember to continue to support one another in the struggle. And I know many of you have become friends because of this unity, and as many have said tonight, we're weak divided, it's united that we are strong. Thank you, everyone, and on to you, Kathy.
Sorry. Thank you, Thalia. To finish, look, this is just a short finish. Like, I think we've suggested that you can find those campaigns for Raise the Age and for ending the spithoods and those things. I see that Sabine did post, if you want to be on Stop the Intervention Collective's mailing list, you can, she's posted that in the chat. Look, I don't think there's anything I can add except, to say thank you to the people who've spoken, because it's from the heart and it's deep, and just express our gratitude for what you've given, what you give all the time. Look, I did write this to say just at the end, with an election imminent, it's time to demand of politicians and lawmakers that all articles of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People are written into law and upheld in Australia. Because Australia signed on and just didn't change anything, and it's been condemned by various rapporteurs that have visited Australia. But if those rights were written into law, then First Nations people's voices would have to be, the very first article is the right to free, prior and informed consent, and there was none of that, and that's like step one. So I'm not going to say any more. Just an extra point. I'm not going to say more. And now here's one more point that Thalia reminded us just before before we came online, that it's important to remember that the intervention has been supported by both major parties. It's come up tonight and it's true. So both the major parties have blood on their hands. So, but there is an election. Maybe now is the time to ask our politicians and to hold them to account if we possibly can. Thank you, everyone. It's been a very powerful forum, and thank you to the people who helped organise it. Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Take care, you mob. Bye, Andy.
Olajuk.
Hey, Frank.
You, Andy, you.
Nobody wants to go.
Let's go.
It's me.
Now I need a beer. No.
No, you'll buy.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.